My grandmother publicly humiliated me in front of our entire family, claiming I was a freeloader who would be completely homeless without her charity. So, I calmly reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the notarized deed she signed 2 years ago, and let the absolute truth destroy her golden child legacy right there in front of everyone. There is a photograph of me from my nephew Tyler's high school graduation that people in my extended family still whisper about to this day. I am standing at the absolute edge of the frame, wearing a charcoal suit jacket that's a little too tight in the shoulders, clapping with a tight, forced smile plastered across my face like glue. My grandmother, Eleanor, is standing dead center, wrapping her arms around Tyler, looking like the benevolent matriarch of the century. You can almost hear her whispering something sweet and encouraging into his ear. No one else looking at that photo sees the severe tension in my jaw or the way my knuckles are white, but I remember that exact second perfectly. Because 5 words from her mouth turned a lifetime of bitter, passive-aggressive history into a boiling point I absolutely refuse to ignore anymore. My name is Marcus. I'm 35 years old. Up until about 3 years ago, I used to think I had a relatively normal, albeit highly annoying, family. We weren't a Hallmark movie family by any stretch of the imagination, but we were the type you tolerate during Thanksgiving and Christmas. You know the exact drill. Passive-aggressive comments buried under mountains of mashed potatoes, side eyes over who makes more money, and forced, hollow laughter at my uncle's terrible jokes. I didn't grow up actively resenting anyone in particular. Not even my older brother, Caleb, who always seemed to be the chosen one. Caleb was, without a doubt, the golden child. He was the high school baseball star, married his gorgeous college sweetheart right after graduation, had a baby a year later, and landed a cushy, high-paying corporate finance job thanks to one of our dad's wealthy golf buddies. He checked every single box my family valued. I didn't mind him back then. We weren't close, but we weren't enemies either. We just existed, in completely parallel lanes. I was the creative, wandering soul, as my mom used to call me with a heavy sigh. I transferred colleges twice, dropped out entirely, worked odd jobs in retail and landscaping, and eventually fell head over heels in love with restoring old, broken down houses. I flipped my first small property in the Seattle suburbs when I was 28, and something in my brain just clicked. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was mine. I learned how to budget down to the last nail, how to pour concrete, how to swing a sledgehammer without throwing my back out, and how to negotiate with grumpy, overworked contractors. I built something tangible with my own 2 hands. But none of that ever mattered to my family, especially not to Grandma Eleanor. Grandma is the kind of woman who keeps score, but she only counts the goals she personally validates. If you show her a stunning piece of furniture you built by hand, she'll say, "That's sweet, Marcus, but where's the 401k? She grew up in an era where success meant a corporate title, a white picket fence, and a corner office on the top floor. Anything outside of that rigid mold was a failure in her eyes. And I was the ultimate failure. I'm single, no kids, and I live in an old craftsman house I restored myself, renting out the basement unit for extra income. To her, that translates to, single man living in a dirty fixer-upper with roommates. I never expected her praise, I really didn't, but I also didn't expect the relentless, constant jabs. It started subtly years ago. At Thanksgiving, I'd bring over a homemade pie, and she'd say, "You still have time to learn a real skill, sweetheart." When I talked about my latest renovation project, she'd smile thinly and ask, "So, when are you going to stop playing in the dirt and get a real job like Caleb?" I always laughed it off. I was the quiet one, the peacekeeper. It was never worth the fight. My mom would give me that pleading just ignore her look across the table, and I always did. But then Caleb's son, Tyler, started growing up, and Grandma found her brand new golden boy. Tyler is a good kid. Smart, polite, a little introverted. He wants to be an architect. When he was younger, I'd take him to my work sites. I'd hand him a tape measure, show him how to use a power drill safely, and sketch out floor plans on scrap drywall. He looked up to me. I remember one summer when he was 10, he looked at a framed-out house and said, "Uncle Marcus, you build castles." For a brief moment, I felt like I had finally earned a sliver of respect from someone in my bloodline. But once Tyler hit his teens, Caleb started aggressively steering him away from me. Caleb told him not to waste his time doing handyman peasant work, and that a prestigious university was his only ticket to a good life. Grandma backed Caleb up every single chance she got, constantly reminding Tyler that he was meant for bigger things than blue-collar labor. Then came the incident with the fourplex. 3 years ago, I found a beat-up, abandoned 4-unit building in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood just outside Seattle. It had a rotting porch, busted windows, and severe water damage. But the bones? The bones were solid oak. I ran the numbers 10 times over. If I could get a $75,000 loan to cover the initial structural repairs and permits, I could flip the units into high-end rentals and make a killing. My credit was decent, but traditional banks were moving at a glacial pace, and interest rates were skyrocketing. The seller wanted a fast close, Or he was going to accept a cash offer from a corporate developer. I remembered Grandma boasting at Easter that she had over $300,000 sitting in a low-yield savings account from when she sold her summer home. Against every single instinct in my body, I drove over to her house and asked for a personal loan. Not a gift. A strict, legally binding loan of $75,000. I brought a printed contract. I offered her 6% interest, which was vastly better than her bank was giving her. She sat in her pristine living room, sipping tea, raised a perfectly drawn eyebrow, and asked, "You'll really pay me back? You won't just lose it all?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Every single penny, Grandma, I promise you." She agreed, but with one major condition. She wanted her name on the property deed just in case I defaulted. It wasn't an unusual arrangement for private family lending. I trusted her. I drew up the paperwork, hired a mobile notary to come to her house, and we sat at her dining table. She didn't even read the contract. The notary asked her to review it, and she literally waved her hand, laughed, and said, "I trust him, he's the good one. I don't need to read the fine print." She signed it, handed me a cashier's check, and that was that. Over the next 24 months, I worked myself to the absolute bone. I lived on ramen, cheap coffee, and pure adrenaline. I paid her back every single month, on time, with the agreed interest. I transferred the final balloon payment exactly 2 years later. She never acknowledged it. No. Thank you. No good job. She just acted like the transaction never happened. I figured it was over. I got the fourplex fixed up, secured 4 incredible tenants, and the property started generating massive passive income. But somewhere along the line, Grandma decided to rewrite history. At every family gathering, she started acting like she was my savior. She'd loudly tell my aunts and uncles that she had to bail Marcus out, and that I'd be living on the streets if she hadn't bought me a building. At a Christmas party, my cousin Leo pulled me aside and whispered, "Man, I didn't know you were bankrupt. It's cool Grandma bought that house for you." I was seeing red. I was absolutely furious. But once again, I swallowed my pride and stayed quiet. She was 82 years old. I figured, let the old woman have her fantasy. What did it really matter? Until Tyler's graduation. Tyler graduated high school with high honors. Caleb and his wife rented out a massive, expensive event hall at a local country club. There was a catered buffet, an open bar, custom banners, the works. I showed up slightly late because I had just finished fixing a burst pipe at one of my units. I had scrubbed my hands raw, but there was still a faint trace of grease under my nails. I brought a gift I thought Tyler would genuinely cherish, a $400 custom engraved drafting tool set in a hand-stitched leather roll, something practical and meaningful for a future architect. When I handed it to him, he gave me a tight, polite smile, mumbled, "Thanks, Uncle Marcus," and immediately tossed it onto a gift table overflowing with iPads, MacBooks, and stacks of cash. Grandma sat next to him at the head table the entire night, holding his hand like he was the second coming of royalty. I sat at a back table near the kitchen doors, sipping a lukewarm club soda, completely ignored by everyone. Then came the toasts. Caleb stood up, clinking his expensive champagne glass, and gave a pompous speech about hard work, corporate success, and the elite pedigree of our family. Everyone clapped politely. I was halfway through a bite of dried chicken when Grandma stood up. No one expected her to speak. She walked slowly, dramatically, over to Tyler, placed both hands firmly on his shoulders, grabbed the microphone, and looked dead at me across the room. "Tyler," she announced, her voice echoing loudly through the speakers, "you are going to achieve incredible things. This is what true success looks like. Not like your Uncle Marcus, who lives off handouts and needs his grandmother to buy him a roof over his head." The entire hall froze. The clinking of silverware stopped. The air was violently sucked out of the room. No one laughed. No one breathed. The. She stared at me, and her eyes were filled with such pure, unadulterated malice that it genuinely shocked me. Her eyes said it all: "You never mattered, and you never will." I didn't yell. I didn't throw my drink. I didn't storm out. I calmly wiped my mouth with a napkin, stood up, and reached into my inner jacket pocket. I pulled out a folded document I had brought with me by pure coincidence. I was meeting my lawyer the next morning to transfer the fourplex into an LLC, and I needed the original deed. It was the notarized copy of the deed she had signed, the one with the specific clause proving I was the sole owner after full repayment. I walked across the silent room. Every single eye was on me. I stopped in front of Grandma, handed her the paper, and said, "Since we're talking about handouts, I thought you might want to read this." She looked confused. She unfolded it and read the first few lines. Her lips moved silently. Then, the color completely drained from her face. Her hands began to tremble so violently the paper shook. She looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She realized I had the proof. I turned to the room, my voice perfectly level, and said, "I borrowed $75,000 from Eleanor at 6% interest. I paid it back in full, 24 months ago. I own the property outright. I have never taken a handout in my entire life. I didn't wait for a response. I turned around, walked out the double doors, and drove home. My heart was pounding out of my chest, but I felt a strange, terrifying sense of liberation. I had finally snapped. But what I didn't know was that this was just the beginning of the most insane, vicious war my family had ever seen. Update 1. Over the next week, the fallout was apocalyptic. My phone exploded with texts from cousins, aunts, and uncles. Some were confused, some were angry I disrespected an elder, and some were just nosy. I ignored all of them. I threw myself into my work, renovating a new duplex I had just acquired. Then, my Uncle David called me. He's Caleb's biggest cheerleader. Marcus, he barked into the phone, Grandma says you tricked her. She says you slipped a fake deed past her and stole her equity in that building. I laughed out loud. She signed it in front of a licensed notary, David. She told the notary she didn't want to read it. I have the receipts of every single bank transfer. He grunted, well, Caleb says you manipulated an old woman with a failing memory. You're disgusting. And he hung up. That's when the strategy became clear. Grandma wasn't just embarrassed, she was vindictive. In her twisted mind, that fourplex was her legacy. She wanted to hold it over my head forever, and eventually, I suspect, she planned to leave her share of it to Caleb or Tyler in her will. Now that I had shattered that illusion in public, she and Caleb were teaming up to destroy me. 2 weeks later, I received a certified letter from a high-end Seattle law firm. It was a formal notice of intent to sue. Grandma was contesting the deed, claiming she lacked informed consent, and that I had committed elder financial abuse by exploiting her alleged early-stage dementia. I felt physically sick. My own brother was orchestrating a legal hit on me. I called my lawyer, Mr. Sterling. He looked over the letter and actually chuckled. Marcus, this is a scare tactic. They have no case. You have a notarized contract, proof of repayment, and a clear forfeiture clause. They just want to bleed you in legal fees until you settle and give them a percentage of the property. I told him I wouldn't give them a single dime, but the emotional toll was heavy. The rumors spread like wildfire. Caleb was actively calling my extended family, telling them I was a predator. He even managed to get a few of my distant friends to block me on social media. I lost a lucrative contracting job because the client heard I was being investigated for elder abuse. I hit rock bottom the morning I walked out to my truck and found it vandalized. Someone had thrown a dozen eggs at the windshield, and scrawled in bright red spray paint across the driver's side door were the words, "Elder Abuser." I stood in the driveway, the smell of rotting egg yolk hitting my nose, and I just broke. I felt completely isolated. I filed a police report, but without cameras, there was nothing they could do. I spent 3 days in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I should just sell the property, give Grandma a cut, and move across the country to escape this toxic bloodline. But on the 4th night, I couldn't sleep. I got up, pulled the original contract out of my safe, and read it line by line, and there it was. Paragraph 14, subsection C. A clause my lawyer had insisted on adding 3 years ago to protect me from this exact scenario. Upon full repayment of the principal and agreed interest, Party B, lender, unconditionally forfeits any and all claims, liens, or rights to the physical and financial assets associated with the property, present and future, in perpetuity. Any frivolous legal challenge to this forfeiture will result in the lender assuming all legal fees and punitive damages. It was an ironclad death trap for her lawsuit, and I realized something else. If Caleb was pushing the dementia angle, I needed proof that her mind was perfectly fine. I made a list. I was done playing defense. It was time to go on the absolute offensive. Update 2. I started gathering my ammunition in total silence. First, I reached out to the one person who had texted me support, my cousin Leo. Leo hated Caleb's arrogance and had always liked me. I met him for coffee and laid out everything. He was disgusted by what Caleb was doing. "They're trying to ruin your life, man," Leo said, shaking his head. "What do you need me to do?" "I need ears on the inside," I told him, "and I need a massive favor for the family reunion next month." Next, I called my mom. She had been agonizingly neutral this whole time, playing the classic peacekeeper. I invited her over, showed her the vandalized truck, the legal threats, and the bank statements. She broke down in tears. She finally admitted that she had overheard Caleb and Grandma plotting. Grandma had promised to rewrite her will and leave her entire estate over $1.5 million solely to Caleb if he helped her win my property. My mom was furious at the betrayal. "She's not confused, Marcus, she is cruel. She knows exactly what she's doing. I need proof she doesn't have dementia," I said. My mom nodded. "I am her medical proxy. I take her to her checkups. I'll get her records. You." 3 days later, my mom handed me a signed letter from Grandma's primary care physician, dated just 2 months ago, stating unequivocally that Eleanor scored perfectly on her cognitive exams and showed zero signs of dementia or memory loss. Finally, I tracked down the mobile notary, a woman named Sarah. I explained the situation and asked if she remembered the signing. "Oh, I remember her," Sarah laughed. "She was incredibly sharp. Offered me lemonade, complained about the stock market, and explicitly told me she didn't need to read the contract because she knew how to handle her family. I'll gladly sign a sworn affidavit stating she was fully lucid and refused to review the terms." I took everything to my lawyer. We drafted a massive countersuit for defamation, malicious prosecution, and tortious interference with my business, but I told Mr. Sterling to hold off on filing it. I wanted to serve them personally. In public, the annual family reunion was held at Lake Sammamish State Park. It was a huge affair, over 40 relatives, barbecue grills, coolers of beer, the whole 9 yards. I knew Grandma and Caleb would use this event to rally the family against me. I showed up wearing a clean polo and jeans, carrying a thick manila envelope. Leo had already arrived. He had brought a friend of his who operated a high-end commercial drone. The friend was flying it around the park, supposedly just getting cool shots of the family. In reality, the drone was hovering directly above the main picnic tables, recording crystal clear 4K video and audio. I walked right up to the central pavilion. Caleb was flipping burgers, wearing a smug grin. Grandma was sitting in a lawn chair, holding court with my aunts, playing the frail, victimized old woman. When they saw me, the entire pavilion went dead silent. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here, Marcus," Caleb sneered, pointing a pair of tongs at me. "After what you did to Grandma." "I'm just here to clear the air, Caleb," I said loudly, making sure every single relative in a 50-foot radius could hear me. I opened the envelope. "Grandma," I said, stepping toward her. "Your lawyer sent me a letter claiming you have dementia and didn't know what you were signing." Grandma put a trembling hand to her chest. I was confused, Marcus. You took advantage of a sick old woman." Aunt Linda gasped and glared at me. "That's interesting," I replied, pulling out the doctor's letter. "Because I have a signed medical evaluation from Dr. Aris, dated 8 weeks ago, stating you have absolutely zero cognitive decline. In fact, he noted your memory is exceptional for your age." I dropped copies of the letter onto the picnic table. People immediately leaned in to read them. Grandma's fake trembling stopped instantly. Her face flushed bright red. "Furthermore," I continued, pulling out the next document, "here is a sworn affidavit from the state licensed notary who was present when you signed the deed. She testifies under penalty of perjury that you were completely lucid, joked about the stock market, and explicitly refused to read the contract despite being legally advised to do so." I dropped the copies on the table. Caleb dropped the tongs. He stormed around the grill, his face purple with rage. "This is bullshit. You forged that." It's notarized, Caleb," I said calmly, "just like the contract that clearly states if she challenges my ownership, she pays all my legal fees." I looked around at my aunts, uncles, and cousins. They were staring at Grandma in absolute shock. "She lied to all of you," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the park. "She didn't bail me out. I paid her back with 6% interest. And Caleb is only helping her because she promised to write all of you out of her will and give him the entire $1.5 million estate if he gets my building." Total chaos erupted. Aunt Linda whipped around to look at Grandma. "Is that true, Eleanor? You're cutting us out for Caleb?" Grandma stammered, looking frantically at Caleb for help. But Caleb was frozen. He realized he had just been exposed in front of the entire bloodline. "Oh, and Caleb?" I said, pulling out the final document. It was a copy of the defamation lawsuit. "You told clients I was an elder abuser. You cost me a $40,000 contracting job. You had someone egg my truck. So, as of yesterday morning, my lawyer officially filed a defamation and tortious interference lawsuit against both of you for $250,000. I slapped the lawsuit onto Caleb's chest. He reflexively grabbed it, his eyes wide with sheer panic. "I'll see you in court," I said. I turned around, gave Leo a nod. He gave me a thumbs up, confirming the drone caught every second of the confession and the crowd's reaction, and I walked back to my truck. I had never felt lighter in my entire life. Update 3. It has been 6 months since the reunion, and the nuclear fallout has settled into a beautiful, quiet peace for me. Caleb and Grandma's legal defense crumbled instantly. When their lawyers saw the doctor's note, the notary affidavit, and the drone footage clearly showing their panic and inability to deny the will tampering allegations, they advised them to surrender immediately. We settled out of court. I demanded a full, signed retraction of all their lies, sent via email to every single family member and my former clients. I also made them pay my $15,000 in legal fees, plus $35,000 in damages for the lost contract and the vandalism to my truck. But the absolute best part? Caleb works in wealth management. His firm's compliance department has extremely strict morality clauses. When the client I lost casually mentioned to a mutual contact that Caleb was involved in a messy, fraudulent elder abuse lawsuit scheme, word got back to his bosses. A massive internal investigation was launched. While he wasn't officially fired, he was stripped of his senior portfolio manager title, demoted to a non-client facing risk analysis role, and completely lost his end-of-year bonus. His wife is furious, and they are reportedly in intensive marriage counseling. As for Grandma Eleanor, the family completely abandoned her. Once the aunts and uncles realized she was willing to cut them all out of the will just to spite me, they stopped calling. She spent Thanksgiving and Christmas entirely alone in her big, pristine, empty house. My mom checks on her once a month out of pure obligation, but says Grandma mostly just sits in her recliner, bitter and isolated, watching daytime TV. I am thriving. The fourplex is fully rented out, generating fantastic income. I used the settlement money to put a down payment on a commercial warehouse space to expand my renovation business. I have more clients than I can handle. I still talk to Leo, my mom, and a few cousins who apologized for doubting me, but I have completely blocked Caleb and Grandma from my life forever. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't screaming or fighting. It's letting toxic people dig their own graves, handing them the shovel, and catching it all on a 4K drone camera. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out and allows us to bring you even more awesome stories. Thank you so much for watching. My parents secretly managed my wife's affair with my golden boy brother. So, I hosted his baby shower and projected their texts to 60 guests. 2 months ago, I discovered my wife was sleeping with my older brother, and my own parents were actively helping them hide it to protect his marriage to a wealthy heiress. They thought I was just a clueless, pathetic placeholder, so I spent 8 weeks compiling every deleted text, bank transfer, and dirty secret, only to project it all onto a massive screen in front of 60 people at his lavish baby shower. Original post: I am Liam, 33 years old. I always thought I was building a solid, honest life. While I was busting my back working 60-hour weeks in corporate logistics, missing out on sleep, and pouring every ounce of my energy into paying off our mortgage, my entire reality was actually a meticulously constructed lie. To understand how this nightmare unfolded, you have to understand my family dynamic. I was never the favorite. Growing up, my older brother, Sebastian, was the blazing sun, and I was just a cold rock floating aimlessly in his orbit. If Sebastian got a B on a test, my parents, Arthur and Eleanor, celebrated it as a monumental triumph. If I got an A, it was barely acknowledged. When it came time for college, they emptied the collective family fund to send Sebastian to a ridiculously expensive private university so he could network, leaving me to work 2 grueling jobs to put myself through a local state school. I never complained. I just internalized the fact that I had to earn my place through sweat, while Sebastian was handed the keys to the kingdom. That favoritism peaked when Sebastian married Victoria. Victoria comes from serious old money, the kind of family with massive real estate portfolios, offshore accounts, and ski lodges in Aspen. By marrying her, Sebastian cemented his status as the absolute center of my parents' universe. I, on the other hand, married Elena. We didn't have trust funds, we had a strict budget, but I genuinely thought we were a team. I thought she was my sanctuary. Everything shattered on a Friday evening in late autumn. We were at my parents' sprawling suburban estate for a special dinner. Sebastian had just announced that Victoria was pregnant with their first child. My parents were glowing. I was sitting at the long mahogany dining table with Elena, feeling a deep sense of gratitude as she rested her hand warmly on my thigh. After dinner, the women moved to the living room, and my dad took Sebastian to his den. I was left entirely to my own devices, the usual afterthought. I got up to use the restroom down the dimly lit hallway. On my way back, I passed the kitchen. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar, casting a thin slice of light across the floor. I heard hushed, urgent voices. It was my mother, my father, and Sebastian. I stopped. Sebastian sounded desperate, a tone I had never heard from him. He was pacing, saying he was terrified because Victoria was asking questions about his late nights. He said Elena was getting overly attached, sending him messages during the workday, and that he needed to cut the affair off completely now that the baby was on the way. My heart physically stopped beating. The sensation was violently abrupt, as if someone had injected ice water directly into my veins. The world tilted. Elena? My wife? Then my father, Arthur, spoke. His voice was calm, like a man managing a minor corporate crisis. He told Sebastian to pull himself together, calling it a stupid physical mistake, brought on by stress. He chuckled a low, dismissive sound that made my stomach turn and assured Sebastian that no one was going to blow up the family reputation over a few reckless nights in a downtown hotel. But it was my mother's words that truly destroyed me. Eleanor sighed, her heels clicking on the tile. I told Elena to delete all the messages from her phone immediately, she said, her voice dripping with calculated coldness. I made it very clear to her that Liam must never find out about this. Your brother is far too sensitive, Sebastian. He lacks the emotional maturity to handle these adult complexities. We are not letting Liam's fragile feelings jeopardize your marriage with Victoria. Her family's inheritance is far too important for your future. Elena knows her place, and she knows what she stands to lose. I stopped breathing entirely. My vision blurred with dark, fuzzy spots. My knees went weak, and I had to press my palms flat against the wall to keep from collapsing. They weren't just hiding an affair, they were actively managing it. They were protecting Sebastian's reputation while completely sacrificing my life and sanity. To my own parents, my profound pain was just a logistical inconvenience. I silently backed away, retreating into the guest bathroom. I locked the door, gripped the porcelain sink, and stared at my reflection. I looked like a dead man. The urge to march into that kitchen, flip the table, and scream until my vocal cords tore was overwhelming, but a freezing cold clarity washed over my burning rage. If I confronted them now, they would immediately gaslight me, call me crazy, and make me the villain for ruining Victoria's special night. If I wanted justice, I couldn't throw a tantrum. I needed to be surgical. I needed to burn their entire kingdom to the ground, leaving absolutely no room for denial. I splashed freezing water on my face, pasted a dead, convincing smile onto my lips, and walked back into the living room. I sat down right next to the woman who was sleeping with my brother, looked across the room at the parents who had sold my soul, and I played my part flawlessly. Edit. A lot of you are asking how I survived the car ride home that night without crashing. It was pure psychological torture. Elena sat in the passenger seat scrolling through her phone, smelling like the expensive custom perfume I had saved up for months to buy her. She casually smiled and said, "Great news about the baby, right? Such a blessing for the family." The seamless, sociopathic ability to lie directly to my face terrified me. I realized I was married to a predator wearing the skin of my wife. Update 1. Over the next few days, I became a ghost in my own home. I watched Elena's every move with clinical precision. I noticed how she guarded her phone and the subtle flinches when I walked into a room unexpectedly. I was gathering my strength when the universe tested my sanity again. My mother called me while I was at the office. "Liam, darling," she chirped, the fake cheerfulness making my skin crawl. "Victoria's wealthy family is handling the formal baby shower, but I want our side of the family to do something special. Since you're Sebastian's brother, it would show incredible family unity if you and Elena hosted a secondary shower at your place." She wanted me to open my home and pay to celebrate the child of the man destroying my marriage. When I hesitated, citing our mortgage, her sweet tone vanished. "Don't be difficult, Liam, just put it on a credit card. You and Elena need to step up." A chilling calm washed over me. They truly believed I was a subservient dog. "Okay, Mom," I said softly, "I'll host it. I'll make sure it's a party no one in this family will ever forget." The transformation from a grieving husband to a cold investigator happened overnight. That night, I waited until Elena was in a deep sleep. I slipped her phone off the nightstand. She had changed her passcode, but she wasn't as clever as she thought. I had watched her type it in a few days prior. The passcode was Sebastian's birthday. The sheer disrespect almost made me drop the device. Her message apps were scrubbed clean. But people who aren't tech savvy have no idea how cloud servers work. The next morning, I called in sick and drove straight to my corporate IT colleague, Jax. Jax is deeply cynical, heavily tattooed, and fiercely loyal. I set Elena's backed-up laptop on his table and told him everything. It took Jax 4 grueling hours to bypass the encryptions and dig through the synchronized cloud backups. When the recovered folders populated on the monitor, the silence in the room was deafening. There were hundreds of photos, undeniable proof taken in high-end hotels, in Sebastian's luxury car, and even in my parents' guest bedroom during a Thanksgiving visit 2 years ago. But the text messages were the killing blow. Jax pulled up a recovered chat between Elena and my mother, Eleanor. My blood turned to ice. "Elena, Eleanor, I'm freaking out. Sebastian says we have to stop. What if Liam finds out?" "Eleanor, calm down. Liam is entirely oblivious. He goes to work, pays the bills, and doesn't ask questions. Just delete your messages." "Elena, but I love Sebastian, it's not fair." "Eleanor, you two have a special connection, I've always seen it, but Sebastian has a duty to Victoria right now. Her family's real estate trust is vital. Just play the good, supportive wife to Liam. We will manage this." My own mother called my wife's affair a special connection and coached her on how to deceive me. I was a pathetic placeholder. I had Jax print every single photo, text log, and digital timestamp. We filled 3 heavy-duty binders. 2 days later, my supposedly best friend, Derek, came over unannounced. Derek stood next to me at the altar. He brought a 6-pack of beer and a nervous, erratic energy. We sat on the porch, and he awkwardly started talking about how marriage is tough and forgiveness is key. Derek wasn't a philosopher. He only spoke in metaphors when hiding something massive. Then I looked at the driveway. Derek had pulled up in a brand new, fully loaded heavy-duty truck. This was a guy who was drowning in credit card debt a month ago. I knew Sebastian always threw money at his problems. I subtly hit record on my phone and set it face down. "Derek," I whispered, "I know everything about Sebastian and Elena. Derek froze. All the blood drained from his face. How much did he pay you? I asked, my voice deadly calm. Derek cracked. He put his head in his hands and wept. $65,000, he whispered. Sebastian had caught Derek seeing them leave a boutique hotel. Panicking, Sebastian wired the money the next morning under the guise of a startup investment. That was the market price of my dignity. I let the phone record every agonizing word. Then I stood up, stopped the recording, and said, "Get off my property. If I ever see you again, I will ruin you too." Update 2. The 2 weeks leading up to the baby shower were surreal. At home, I played the oblivious husband flawlessly. I ordered premium catering and put the massive bill on a new credit card solely in Elena's name debt she would be absorbing in the divorce. I lost 15 pounds because I could barely force food down while sitting across from a monster. But behind closed doors, I was preparing for a scorched earth war. I went to a commercial print shop 2 towns over and printed the most graphic photos on large, high-resolution glossy paper. I bought a luxurious, custom-made velvet-lined gift box and meticulously packed the photos inside, layered with the horrific text between Elena and my mother. Before dropping the bomb, I secured my future. I scheduled a private meeting with Vance, the CEO of my company. I told him I wanted to take over the new branch opening in Seattle. Vance respected ruthless efficiency. He looked at my file, nodded, and handed me the expansion project, a massive bump in salary, full executive relocation, and complete autonomy. I walked out, drove straight to a high-profile family law attorney, and initiated the paperwork for a ruthless divorce, locking down my finances so Elena couldn't touch a dime of my new salary or savings. Saturday finally arrived. My backyard was transformed into a sickeningly sweet wonderland of pastel green and crisp white. 60 guests filled the yard, including Victoria's highly influential parents, Richard and Sylvia. Richard was a man who commanded instant respect, a corporate shark who absolutely did not tolerate public embarrassment. Sebastian arrived late, looking like a triumphant king, his arm protectively around Victoria's pregnant belly. My parents trailed behind, beaming with radiant pride, parading them around like royalty. Elena played the perfect hostess, kissing Sebastian warmly on the cheek. My mother walked up to me, fixing my collar with a condescending smile. "You did a really good job today, Liam. Sebastian is very pleased." I smiled, letting the coldness reach my eyes. "Just wait until he opens his present. I put a lot of heart into it. It's exactly what he deserves." She patted my cheek, completely oblivious to the executioner standing in her yard. It was time. I retrieved the heavy velvet box from my safe and walked to the microphone set up near the gifts. I tapped it twice. The sharp feedback whined, and 60 heads turned. The backyard fell dead silent. "Thank you all for being here," I started, my voice echoing clearly. "Family is the most important thing. We build our lives around the people we deeply trust. Today, we celebrate the expansion of our family." I saw my mother dab her eye with a napkin. She actually thought I was giving a heartfelt speech. "Sebastian," I continued, turning to my brother. "Growing up, you were the golden boy. You took what you wanted, and our parents made sure you never faced consequences. But stepping into fatherhood requires absolute honesty and unshakable integrity. So, I put together a very special gift that encapsulates the bond you share with the people closest to you. Could you and Victoria come up here?" Sebastian smiled his $1,000,000 smile, kissing Victoria's cheek as they walked up. I handed him the heavy velvet box. "Open it," I said softly, barely picking up on the mic. "I want you to see exactly what you've built." Sebastian chuckled arrogantly. He pulled the silver ribbon and lifted the lid. Victoria leaned in with a happy smile, expecting an antique silver rattle. Instead, Sebastian looked down, and the entire world stopped spinning. The arrogant smile shattered into a million terrified pieces. He went pale as a ghost, his hands trembling so violently the heavy box shook. "What is this?" Victoria asked in genuine confusion. She reached in and pulled out the top photograph. It was a massive, glossy print of Sebastian and Elena walking out of the downtown hotel, Elena kissing his neck with graphic passion. Victoria stopped breathing. Her eyes widened to saucers. Sebastian desperately tried to grab the box back, his voice cracking in pure panic. "Liam, stop. Victoria, do not look at that." "Oh, I think absolutely everyone here should look at it," I boomed into the microphone. I calmly pulled a small black remote from my pocket. Earlier, Jax had helped me rig a massive commercial projector aimed at the blank white wall of the event tent. I pressed the power button. A 10-foot-tall, high-definition screenshot flared to life for all 60 guests to see. It was the text thread between Elena and my mother. The massive font loomed like a death sentence. "Eleanor, Liam is entirely oblivious. Sebastian has a serious duty to Victoria right now. Her family's inheritance is vital. Do not ruin this for him. Liam, Liam." The collective gasp sucked all the oxygen out of the yard. My mother let out a horrifying shriek, dropping her champagne flute. It shattered violently against the stone patio. Total pandemonium erupted. Victoria dropped the velvet box like it was burning acid. Dozens of glossy photos of my wife and brother scattered wildly across the grass. Victoria let out a guttural, agonizing sob, clutching her stomach and stumbling backward. Victoria, please, it meant nothing. Sebastian pleaded, raising his hands. Do not take another step toward my daughter. The voice boomed with terrifying authority. The voice boomed with terrifying authority. Richard, Victoria's father, pushed past the paralyzed guests, his face mottled purple with unbridled fury. He shoved Sebastian backward with so much intense force that my golden boy brother fell hard onto the grass, landing right on top of the photos of his infidelity. You parasitic piece of garbage. Richard spat. You thought you could secure your trust fund while sleeping with your brother's wife. You are dead in this town. Elena suddenly snapped out of her frozen state. The terrifying reality hit her. She ran toward me, her eyes wide with feral panic, digging her manicured nails into my arm. Liam, please. Your mother made me do it. She manipulated me. She screamed, instantly throwing Eleanor under the bus. I looked at the woman I had shared my life with and felt absolutely nothing. I calmly reached into my suit jacket, pulled out a thick manila envelope, pried her fingers off my arm, and pressed it against her chest. Those are your formal divorce papers. I said clearly into the microphone. Because of the irrefutable proof of infidelity and misappropriation of marital funds, I am keeping the entire equity of our real estate, my full salary, and my retirement accounts. You have exactly 2 hours to get your belongings out of my house before I have you arrested for trespassing. Do not ever speak to me again. I stepped away, leaving her sobbing uncontrollably. I looked into the crowd and locked eyes with Vance, my CEO. He wasn't panicking. He just gave me a slow, deeply respectful nod. I had just dismantled a complex network of lies with surgical precision. My promotion and relocation to Seattle were fully secured. My father, Arthur, finally broke out of his shock. His face bright red, he marched over. Turn that projector off. You are humiliating us. How could you do this? I stared dead into his eyes and clicked the remote. The screen changed to the $65,000 bank transfer receipt to Derek. I leaned into the mic, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Private family matter, Dad? Is that what you call actively conspiring to hide an affair and paying off my best friend? You proved your moral compass is entirely dictated by bank accounts. My mother was sobbing on the patio. Her wealthy country club friends stared at her with unfiltered disgust. Aunt Agatha, the ultimate social climber, was already sprinting toward the exit to distance herself from the radioactive fallout. I dropped the microphone. It hit the grass with a heavy thud. I turned my back on the screaming chaos, walked through the stunned crowd that parted like the Red Sea, and went straight into my house. I didn't stick around to watch the physical violence, but Jax gave me the blow-by-blow later. The moment I went inside, Sebastian tried to stand up. Richard intercepted him with surprising speed and delivered a flawless, bone-crushing right hook to Sebastian's jaw. The sound of his nose breaking echoed across the yard. Sebastian went down hard, blood pouring onto his designer shirt. Completely unconscious, Arthur foolishly charged at Richard, shouting about lawsuits. Richard, an avid boxer, easily sidestepped and planted a brutal punch into my father's ribs, dropping him to his knees in agony. Meanwhile, Sylvia, Victoria's mother, marched up to my wailing mother. Sylvia didn't yell. She simply grabbed a massive handful of Eleanor's freshly styled hair and yanked downward with all her body weight. By the time caterers pulled Sylvia off, my mother was missing a chunk of hair, her dress was torn, and her high society dignity was entirely erased. While the police were called to break up the brawl, I was inside shoving Elena's designer clothes and cosmetics into black garbage bags. I dragged 6 massive bags to the front lawn. When Elena stumbled to the front, makeup smeared and crying, I held up my phone. I have the police on speed dial. Take your trash and get off my property. She grabbed 2 bags and dragged them down the street. Update 3, Final Aftermath. The universe wasn't quite done dispensing absolute karma. The most poetic twist of fate occurred 6 weeks after my divorce was finalized and the house was sold. I was sitting in my new, spacious high-rise apartment in Seattle when I got a call from Diana, Elena's former best friend. Her voice was shaking with bitter vindication. Diana was going through a vicious divorce. During legal discovery, she hired a private investigator to look into her husband, Marcus, a wealthy real estate developer who frequently partnered with Sebastian. Elena wasn't just sleeping with your brother. Diana laughed, a dry, humorless sound. She was sleeping with Marcus, too. She was juggling both of them. And that's not even the best part. What could possibly be the best part? I asked. Victoria gave birth 2 days ago. Diana whispered. The baby came early. Richard demanded a full paternity DNA test at the hospital before signing off on the trust fund. Liam, Sebastian is absolutely not the father. The baby is Marcus's. I sat up straight, my heart pounding, and then I actually laughed out loud. The staggering irony was beautiful. Victoria had been secretly sleeping with Marcus for the last year. Sebastian was cheating on Victoria with Elena, and Victoria was cheating on Sebastian with Marcus. Sebastian, the golden boy who threw away his family to secure a wealthy inheritance, had been completely cucked by his own business partner. The child he thought was his permanent ticket to luxury wasn't his blood. He had destroyed my life and caught a brutal beating for absolutely nothing. When the DNA results came back, Richard's lawyers mercilessly severed Sebastian from Victoria's life. Because of an ironclad prenuptial agreement, Sebastian didn't get a single dime. He was physically thrown out of the estate, entirely bankrupt, publicly humiliated, and biologically irrelevant. The fallout was absolute. Elena, abandoned by a ruined Sebastian and dumped by Marcus, moved back into her parents' rundown house. She now works a grueling minimum wage retail job just to make the monthly payments on the massive credit card debt I legally forced her to assume. Sebastian, socially blacklisted by Richard's powerful corporate network, had nowhere to go. The 34-year-old golden boy moved back into his childhood bedroom. My parents, who sacrificed my mental health to protect his pristine image, are now permanently stuck, supporting a broke, depressed man, who will never amount to anything. Their country club friends completely abandoned them. As for me, my life skyrocketed. The executive relocation package covered everything. My new salary is double what I was making. Without Elena draining my finances, my investment accounts exploded. I live in a modern high-rise overlooking the Seattle skyline. Jack's even transferred to my branch, and we regularly grab beers after work. I am thriving in ways I never thought possible. I received one final phone call from my family late on a Tuesday night. It was my mother. She sounded frail, weak, completely stripped of her arrogance. "Liam, please don't hang up," she cried. "The house is so quiet. Sebastian is struggling with severe depression. Your father's ribs still haven't healed right. We are family. We need to talk about your inheritance and how we can fix this." I leaned against my granite counter, looking out at the glittering city lights. I didn't feel angry, I just felt profound pity. She was trying to use a vague financial promise to buy back the loyal son she threw away. "Mom," I said, my voice entirely devoid of emotion, "you don't have a son named Liam anymore. That version of me died the night I heard you whispering in the kitchen. Keep your money. Give the inheritance to Sebastian, he's going to desperately need it for his legal and therapy bills. Do not ever call this number again." I hung up. I permanently blocked her number, my father's number, and Sebastian's number. I severed the final rotting thread to my toxic past. Sometimes, to build a life of true peace, you have to strike the match and burn down the toxic foundation you were standing on. I walked straight through the fire, and I came out forged in absolute steel. Top comments. User 1. The absolute definition of scorched earth. The fact that your parents actively coached her on how to hide it while calling your pain a logistical inconvenience is pure evil. But the twist with Marcus, chef's kiss. Karma didn't just knock, it drove a bulldozer through their front door. User 2, I am in awe of your self-control. Sitting through that dinner, planning the baby shower, and paying for the catering on a card in her name, you played 4D chess while they were playing checkers. Glad your CEO saw the absolute boss move and gave you the promotion. User 3, Richard punching Sebastian and Sylvia dragging your mom by her hair is the most satisfying suburban brawl I have ever read. They thought they were untouchable because of their money, but money can't buy you a new jaw or a new reputation. Enjoy Seattle, King. My sister told everyone I didn't pay a penny for our mom's birthday and that I shouldn't eat the food. Instead of arguing, I just walked out and let the restaurant hand her the bill that exposed every lie. My name is Clara, and I am 29 years old. I work as a senior marketing director at a large tech firm in Chicago. For as long as I can remember, my older sister Chloe, 32, has been the golden child of our family. Chloe has a very specific, very toxic talent. She is an absolute master at taking credit for other people's hard work, especially mine. This wasn't a new dynamic. When I was 17, I spent 3 months building a complex robotics project for a state science fair. Chloe, who was home from college, stood by my display and told every judge that she had mentored and guided my entire build. At my college graduation, she gave a sweeping, tear-jerking toast about how she had financially supported me through school, completely glossing over the fact that I worked 3 jobs and she hadn't sent me a single penny. Whenever I tried to correct the record, my mother, Evelyn, would pull me aside and say, "Clara, you're being too sensitive. Real family doesn't keep score. Let your sister have her moment." Whenever I stayed quiet, Chloe treated my silence as permission to push the boundary even further. Why did I keep hoping my generosity would magically make my family treat me fairly? I wish I had a noble, enlightened answer. The ugly truth was that I just wanted my mother to look at me with the same uncomplicated, beaming pride she gave Chloe. I wanted just one family evening where no one compared us, where no one corrected me, and where my efforts weren't instantly hijacked. A month ago, my mom called to say she wanted a simple, elegant dinner for her 65th birthday. In our family, simple never stays simple. My father, Arthur, suggested the Azure Room, a stunning private dining suite inside the Grand Marlowe Hotel downtown. It's the exact place my parents had their first anniversary dinner decades ago. As soon as the idea was floated in the family group chat, Chloe immediately announced, "I will handle the entire vision, Mom deserves the absolute best." And just like clockwork, after sending that message, Chloe vanished. Whenever the hotel's event staff reached out asking for a deposit, a signed contract, a finalized menu, or a guest count, Chloe was suddenly unreachable. I had recently received a massive promotion at my firm, and I decided I wanted to cover the entire dinner as my gift to my mom. I didn't want a parade. I didn't want a grand speech. I just wanted my mom to have a beautiful night. So, I called the hotel. I spoke with the event coordinator, a wonderfully calm and professional man named Marcus. I signed the contract, paid a $2,500 non-refundable room deposit, and authorized my platinum card for the estimated balance of $8,750 after service. The total package was roughly $11,250. I didn't tell my family the financial amount. I only texted Chloe privately to say, "The reservation is totally secured and paid for. Please just send me any dietary restrictions from the relatives by Friday." Chloe replied with a single thumbs up emoji. 10 minutes later, she posted in the main family group chat, "Everything is booked and taken care of. I've handled the venue and the finances. Mom is going to be treated like a queen." Relatives immediately flooded the chat thanking her. My mom sent a string of crying face and heart emojis, writing, "My beautiful, generous Chloe, I am so blessed." I stared at my phone screen for a long time, my chest tightening. I wondered why it still physically hurt to watch Chloe receive universal praise for work she hadn't even touched, but I let it go. I told myself this was for Mom. Then, the upgrades began. A week before the dinner, Marcus copied me on an email thread. Chloe had reached out to the hotel directly. She tried to add a premium $150 per person wine pairing, a massive imported caviar bar, custom imported orchids, and 6 random guests I had never even met, her own friends. Each time Marcus replied asking for payment authorization, Chloe wrote back, "Approved, Clara will handle the card on file." I immediately called Marcus. I made it crystal clear that no additional charges could be finalized without my direct, written consent. He apologized profusely and locked the file. I approved the orchids because they were my mom's favorite, and I firmly rejected the caviar, the premium wine, and the extra guests. 2 days later, Chloe called me, furious. "Why are you making this so difficult?" she snapped. "Mom only turned 65 once. You make a ridiculous amount of money, Clara. Stop being so stingy. You are more than welcome to pay for the caviar and the wine yourself, Chloe," I reminded her calmly. She scoffed, a sharp, condescending sound. "You always make money so awkward. You have zero class." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. Chloe wanted the ultimate authority of a wealthy host, without spending a single cent of her own money. Still, I kept the reservation. I ordered a custom gold and ivory cake, prepared a 10-minute slideshow of vintage family photos, and arranged private black car transportation for our elderly grandparents. I even specifically asked Marcus not to announce who had paid. "I don't want a speech about me," I told him. "This night is entirely about my mother." Update 1. The night of the party arrived. I got to the Grand Marlowe early, wearing a tailored emerald green dress and a matching wool coat. Marcus met me in the lobby to review the final estimate. With service tax, gratuity, and the orchids I had approved, the outstanding balance to be charged after dessert was $11,340. I signed the updated authorization pad, thanked him, and slipped the copy into my designer purse. Chloe arrived 30 minutes later. She swept into the room like she owned the building. She kissed my mom on both cheeks, loudly ordered the waitstaff to adjust the lighting, complained that the floral centerpieces were a fraction too low, and loudly told our aunts that she had been working tirelessly for weeks to curate this evening. I heard every word. I said absolutely nothing. Part of me was saving the truth for later, another part was desperately trying to protect my mom's birthday from becoming a war zone. When it was time to sit, Chloe immediately took the host chair right beside Mom. She picked up my meticulously printed place card which Marcus had placed near the head of the table and moved it to the very far end, next to the kitchen doors. When I quietly walked over and moved my place card back to the seat I was assigned, Chloe raised an eyebrow. "That seat is reserved for whoever organized this event, Clara," she whispered sharply. I met her gaze dead on. "Are you absolutely sure you want to make that the rule tonight?" I asked. She smirked, clearly thinking I was bluffing, but I sat down anyway. For the first course, she talked over me. During the second course, she loudly accepted compliments from our grandfather about the stunning venue. By the time the main dish, a beautiful filet mignon, arrived, she had completely rewritten the entire narrative of the evening, placing herself at the absolute center of the universe. And my mom was helping her do it, beaming at her generous eldest daughter. Then, I reached across the table for the silver serving spoon to get some roasted asparagus. That was when Chloe decided that simply taking the credit wasn't enough. She needed to publicly humiliate me. Ah, ah, ah. Don't fill your plate, Clara, Chloe said loudly, tapping the serving spoon with her manicured fingernail. You didn't contribute a single dime to this dinner. You shouldn't be eating the premium food. She didn't whisper. She projected her voice so every single relative at the long table could hear. The warm, lively conversation around us collapsed into a dead, suffocating silence. Forks stopped in midair. I felt that old, familiar family reflex wash over the room. Everyone looked at me, waiting to see how gracefully I would absorb the abuse so they wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. My mother looked down at her wine glass, smiled a tight little smile, and said, "Oh, Chloe is only teasing, Clara. But she is right, real family comes first." We should all be incredibly grateful to the people who actually sacrificed their hard-earned money to show up for me tonight. I had arrived before everyone. I had signed every legal document. I had paid the $2,500 deposit. I was sitting there with an $11,340 authorization on my card. Yet, my own mother's words made me feel like a pathetic, uninvited parasite. I looked at my mom. My voice was dangerously calm. "Who do you genuinely believe paid for tonight, Mom?" She looked startled that I had spoken back. Before she could answer, Chloe let out a cruel, barking laugh. "Please, you probably booked the room with Dad's leftover hotel points, and now you expect a parade. Just put the spoon down, Clara." My cousin lowered his eyes to his lap. My aunt pretended to intensely study her napkin. My dad, Arthur, suddenly found the label on his wine bottle fascinating, studying it as if it held the secrets to the universe. Nobody defended me. Nobody questioned Chloe. I could have opened my purse right then. I could have slammed the contract on the table. I could have listed every phone call, every menu edit, every dollar. But a sudden, freezing realization hit me. If documented proof was the only language my family respected, why was I still volunteering to finance the lives of people who had already decided I was worthless? I gently set the silver serving spoon back down on the table. "You know what? You're absolutely right," I said. Chloe blinked, taken aback. She had been bracing for a screaming match. "I shouldn't eat food I didn't contribute to," I said smoothly. My mom let out a nervous, relieved little sigh, clearly believing I had surrendered to keep the peace. I stood up, perfectly folded my linen napkin, and placed it neatly beside my untouched plate. Chloe's smirk faltered. "Oh my God, Clara, don't be so dramatic. Sit down." "I'm not being dramatic," I said, slipping my arms into my emerald green coat. "I'm just correcting the financial arrangement." I turned on my heel and walked out of the private dining room. The silence behind me was deafening. Not a single person got up to follow me. Not my dad. Not my mom. That realization stung, but it also burned away the last ounce of guilt I had left. I walked straight to the reception desk in the lobby. Marcus was standing there, reviewing the service notes on his tablet. I calmly asked him if the final charge had been processed yet. "No, Miss Watson," he said. "The authorization will convert after the dessert service." "Cancel it," I said. "Remove my platinum card from the folio entirely." Marcus looked up, his professional mask slipping for a fraction of a second. "Miss Watson, I must remind you that your $2,500 room deposit is non-refundable. If I remove your card, the remaining balance of $11,340 will become due immediately from the party inside." "I understand," I replied, my voice steady. "Please keep the deposit. Consider it a generous tip for your staff and the price of a very valuable life lesson for me." Marcus hesitated. "Would you like me to inform them there has been a payment issue?" "No. Tell them the exact truth," I instructed him. "Tell them, the woman in the green dress canceled the reservation payment and asked me to deliver the final bill to the host." Marcus studied my face for a long moment, recognized the absolute finality in my eyes, and gave a sharp nod. I walked toward the glass doors leading to the valet, but I stopped just out of sight, lingering in the shadows of the lobby. I had to see it. Through the massive glass partition, I watched Marcus walk into the private dining room. He carried a heavy, black leather folio. He walked straight past my empty chair, bypassed my father, and placed the folio directly beside Chloe's plate. Chloe's smug smile instantly vanished. My mom leaned forward, her brow furrowed in confusion. I couldn't hear the words through the thick glass, but I could read Marcus's lips perfectly as he repeated my exact phrase. I watched the blood drain from Chloe's face. She looked like she had been struck by lightning. She aggressively flipped open the folio, scanned the bottom line, and physically recoiled. My dad pushed his chair back violently and sprinted out of the room, bursting into the lobby. "Clara, what the hell did you just do?" he yelled, out of breath. Notice his first words. Not, "What did they say to you?" Not, "Why did you leave?" But, "What did you do?" I looked at him with absolute ice in my veins. "I stopped paying for a dinner I was explicitly told I hadn't contributed to." He frantically lowered his voice, looking around the lobby. "Clara, please, this is your mother's 65th birthday. It was also my gift," I shot back. And Chloe rejected my gift in front of the entire family. I am simply respecting her authority as the host. Before my dad could formulate an excuse, Chloe came storming through the glass doors, waving the black leather folio like a weapon. Marcus followed closely behind her, his posture perfectly rigid. "This is insane. You can't just abandon us with a $12,000 bill," Chloe shrieked, completely dropping her refined persona. Marcus stepped forward, his voice projecting clearly into the lobby for the lingering relatives peeking out the door to hear. The original host removed her payment method before settlement. "The outstanding balance is $11,340. How would you like to handle this, ma'am?" "I am the host," Chloe screamed at him. Marcus calmly opened his tablet. "Ma'am, the contract, the $2,500 deposit receipt, the menu approvals, and the original card authorization are all exclusively in Clara Watson's name. The event file also shows several expensive upgrade requests from your email address that were explicitly denied because you were not financially authorized to make them." A loud gasp echoed from the doorway. My aunt whispered to my cousin, "Wait, I thought Chloe paid for all of this?" "Ah. That's what she told us," my cousin muttered back. Chloe's face turned a violent shade of magenta. My mom walked out, looking from Marcus to me as if the floor had turned to liquid. "Clara, please come back inside. We can discuss this privately like adults." "You were perfectly comfortable humiliating me publicly, Mom," I replied. "Why should the truth suddenly require privacy?" That was the exact moment my Grandpa Henry stepped out of the dining room. Grandpa Henry is 78, a retired structural engineer who built his own company from the ground up. He is a man who despises liars. He had been dead quiet all evening, just watching, measuring, and remembering. He slowly took off his glasses and folded them. Before anyone asked Clara for another damn thing, Grandpa Henry's gravelly voice boomed, "Chloe needs to explain to this family why she collected money from several of us to fund a dinner that Clara had already paid for." Chloe froze. I froze, too. I knew Chloe was taking the emotional credit. I had absolutely no idea she was taking actual cash. Grandpa Henry reached into his suit jacket, pulled out his smartphone, and held it up. On the screen was a group text from Chloe that I wasn't included in. It read, "Hey guys, send me your share for Mom's party via Venmo by Friday. I'm covering the bulk of the $12,000, but every little bit helps make it perfect." Below the text was a Venmo transfer receipt from Grandpa Henry for $600. My aunt immediately scrambled for her phone. I sent her $400. My cousin checked his app. I sent $250. Within 60 seconds, 5 different relatives confirmed they had sent Chloe payments totaling exactly $2,500. The entire lobby was dead silent. Nobody was looking at me anymore. Every single eye was locked onto Chloe, who was suddenly trembling. That money was for the extras," Chloe stammered, her eyes darting around wildly. "The custom flowers, the black car transportation, the tips, things Clara probably forgot, because she's so selfish." Marcus, the absolute legend, didn't miss a beat. He turned his tablet so the nearest relatives could clearly see the itemized digital contract. "Sir," Marcus said to Grandpa Henry, "the black car transportation was paid directly in advance by Clara Watson. The floral invoice is fully included in the venue total. A 20% gratuity is also already factored in." Chloe's lies were colliding in midair. First, she claimed the money was in a separate account, then she claimed she spent it on a surprise gift that hadn't arrived yet. Then she hysterically insisted that everyone had simply misunderstood her text message. Grandpa Henry raised one massive, weathered hand, and Chloe shut her mouth. "There is nothing to misunderstand about send me your share," he said, his voice dripping with disgust. "You allowed this entire family to believe you financed this evening. You publicly insulted the sister who actually did. And you stole money from your own relatives on top of it." Chloe panicked. She whipped around and pointed a shaking finger at me. "Clara set this up. She knew exactly how this would look. She's trying to ruin my life." I actually almost admired the sheer delusion it took to turn my boundary into a conspiracy against her. "I didn't know anything about your little Venmo scam, Chloe," I said. "But I do know you tried to secretly add a caviar bar and premium champagne to my tab. Just pay the damn bill, Chloe," my dad suddenly barked. It was the first time I had ever heard him raise his voice at her. Chloe let out a brittle, hysterical laugh. "With what? I don't have $11,000 lying around. Neither did the family members you scammed," Grandpa Henry replied coldly. "Yet, you happily accepted theirs." Cornered, humiliated, and desperate to save face, Chloe aggressively yanked a credit card from her designer clutch and practically threw it at Marcus. "Fine, charge it. Then you can all stop treating me like a criminal." Marcus picked up the card. He walked over to the lobby terminal. The entire family stood in agonizing silence. Beep. 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 Marcus tried again. Beep. Beep. He walked back, his face devoid of emotion. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This card has been declined for insufficient funds." Chloe's face went from magenta to a sickly, pale gray. Her hands were shaking violently now. She fumbled in her purse and produced a second card. Marcus ran it. Beep. Declined. Nobody laughed. The silence was suffocating. In less than 10 minutes, the flawless, successful, generous image Chloe had spent a decade polishing was completely annihilated. She wasn't a wealthy host. She was a broke, manipulative fraud. My mom looked completely devastated, but for the very first time in my 29 years of life, she did not rush forward to shield Chloe. "You looked me in the eye and told me you paid for this room," my mom whispered, her voice cracking. "You let me cry and thank you in front of everyone." Tears finally spilled down Chloe's cheeks, but her tone remained vicious. "I was going to figure it out. Clara always has money. She enjoys acting like the savior." That single, vile sentence extinguished whatever microscopic drop of sympathy remained in the room. I stepped forward, making sure she had to look me directly in the eyes. "I did enjoy helping, Chloe. What I did not enjoy was being erased while you spent my money as evidence of your own superiority. Ownership comes with a price. Enjoy the bill." I turned around, walked out the revolving glass doors, got into my Uber, and went home. Update 2. The fallout was apocalyptic. I turned my phone on the next morning to 84 unread text messages and 12 missed calls. My dad had texted, "Your mother hasn't stopped crying." Chloe had texted, "You are a sociopath, you humiliated me on purpose." My mom had left a frantic voicemail begging me to come back to the hotel and end the night peacefully with your sister. They still believed that peace was something I was obligated to manufacture by swallowing the truth. I ignored all of it. I made myself a cup of premium coffee and slept better than I had in a decade. Later that day, I found out how the restaurant bill was settled. Grandpa Henry forced Marcus to separate the $2,500 in charges for the extra guests Chloe had invited from the main bill. My dad had to empty his personal checking account to cover a portion. My mom had to transfer money from her emergency savings. Several relatives applied their earlier Venmo contributions directly to the restaurant only after forcing Chloe to transfer the funds back right there in the lobby. Chloe had to sign a legally binding, handwritten promissory note to my dad for the remaining $4,000 he covered for her, with monthly interest. The party was completely dead. The photographer packed up early. My gorgeous gold and ivory cake was eaten in miserable silence. On Monday morning, things escalated. I was sitting at my desk when the receptionist called up to say my sister was in the lobby. I went downstairs immediately because I refused to let her cause a scene near my colleagues. Chloe was standing by the elevators wearing huge sunglasses, clutching a white envelope. She shoved it into my chest. "There," she spat. "A cashier's check for $2,500. Your deposit. Now we're perfectly even." I didn't even open the envelope. I handed it right back to her. "We are not even, Chloe. The money was always the easiest part of this." She ripped off her sunglasses. Her eyes were bloodshot, but her rage was fully intact. "What else do you want from me, Clara? A public execution? I've been getting hate texts all weekend." "I want a public correction," I told her firmly. "I want you to post in the family group chat. Tell them I planned and funded the dinner. Tell them you stole their money while claiming you were paying. And I want you to stop speaking for me." She stared at me like I was insane. "You want me to completely destroy my reputation?" "No," I replied softly. "I want you to stop using mine as a human shield." "Mom will never, ever forgive you for this," Chloe hissed, stepping close to my face. That was the moment I realized she hadn't come to my office to apologize. She had come to restore the old world order. She would offer a token check, I would take the blame for ruining the birthday, and she would go back to being the golden child. "Then Mom can make her own choice," I said. I turned my back on her and walked to the elevators. 3 days later, Grandpa Henry summoned an emergency family meeting at my parents' house. I only agreed to attend under the strict condition that nobody would ask me to apologize. When I walked into the living room, Grandpa Henry was sitting in the armchair with a thick, heavy manila folder on his lap. My dad sat on the sofa, looking like he had aged 15 years. Chloe sat across the room, arms crossed, glaring at the floor. My mom started the meeting with her classic, predictable speech. "Sisters have misunderstandings," she wept. "One painful night shouldn't erase a lifetime of family love." I let her finish before I spoke. "I tried family love for years, Mom. Every time Chloe stole my credit, insulted my character, or lied to your face, you told me to let it go. Your version of privacy didn't solve the problem. It protected her abuse." My mom opened her mouth to argue, but Grandpa Henry slammed his hand on the coffee table. He opened his folder. Inside was a 23-page dossier. "I spent the last 3 days calling every single relative," Grandpa Henry announced, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "I asked them to send me every text, every email, and every Venmo receipt involving Chloe for the last 5 years." He started tossing printed pages onto the table. Page 1, the group chat from my college graduation, where Chloe claimed she paid for my celebratory trip to Mexico. "I paid for it with my waitressing money." Page 2. A GoFundMe Chloe set up 3 years ago for mom's medical bills when mom broke her ankle. Chloe kept $1,200 of it for herself. Page 3. Text proving Chloe had systematically lied about my availability, telling relatives I was too busy or too self-important to attend family events that she had intentionally given me the wrong dates for. Chloe's face crumpled as the pages piled up. This wasn't just about one dinner anymore. It was a documented history of pathological manipulation. My dad finally broke. He put his head in his hands and confessed. I knew she was struggling financially, he muttered. She's in massive credit card debt. I've been secretly paying her rent for 6 months. I stayed quiet because every time I confronted her, she threatened to cut us out of her life. I stared at my father, disgusted. Your silence wasn't neutrality, Dad. It was a choice. You actively made her life easier by making mine a living hell. He had no defense. He just nodded, tears falling onto his lap. Chloe looked at Grandpa Henry, her voice shaking. So, what happens now? What happens now? Grandpa Henry said, leaning forward, is that you repay every single cent you owe to your father and your relatives. You post a full, unedited correction in the family group chat. And until you prove you aren't a parasite, you are stripped of all family privileges. You will not manage money, you will not organize holidays, and you will not speak on behalf of this family. Chloe looked at my mom, desperate for a lifeline. For years, organizing family events had been her throne. It was how she maintained her illusion of power. My mom looked at the 23 pages of evidence, looked at me and finally. She nodded in agreement. Chloe burst into tears and ran out of the house. The ultimate twist, however, came a week later. I received an unexpected email from Marcus, the hotel coordinator. Subject: FWD, birthday presentation, final revision. Message: Miss Watson, I was clearing out the event file and felt you needed to see this. I am deeply sorry for how your family treated you. Attached was an email Chloe had sent to the hotel staff on the afternoon of the party. It was a script for a toast she had demanded the staff hand her a microphone for right before the cake cutting. I read the script. In it, Chloe planned to thank Mom for teaching her that true generosity doesn't require a receipt. She then planned to announce that she had personally stepped in to save the party because Clara Me had become too obsessed with corporate greed to care about her own mother. She explicitly instructed the photographer to capture my reaction when she said it. The cruelty wasn't accidental. It was premeditated, polished, and meticulously scheduled. I forwarded the email to my parents and Grandpa Henry with zero commentary. 10 minutes later, my mom called me. She was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. She told me she had just canceled the annual mother-daughter spa trip she takes with Chloe. She told Chloe she couldn't even look at her. That was the loss Chloe feared most. She was no longer the protected, infallible daughter. Update 3, 6 months later. It took Chloe 4 days to post the apology in the family group chat. Her first attempt was full of excuses about high emotions and miscommunication. Grandpa Henry replied publicly, "Try again, without the bullshit." She deleted it. The second version was brutally honest. She admitted to stealing the money, faking the coordination, and lying to humiliate me. The relatives responded with cold, restrained acknowledgments. Nobody attacked her, but nobody rushed to comfort her either. 6 months have passed. My mom invited me to a small, casual family dinner. My first instinct was to say no, but then she sent me the reservation confirmation, the fully paid receipt, and a guest list of just 4 people. Her text said, "You do not need to organize anything. You do not need to pay for anything. You only need to decide if you want to be my daughter today." Ask. I went. Chloe was there. She looked exhausted, humbled, and completely stripped of her arrogance. She had been attending intensive therapy, and had taken a second job to pay off her debts. During dinner, the waiter placed a plate of roasted vegetables between us. I braced for the old reflex. But Chloe didn't tap the spoon. She didn't smirk. She quietly slid the dish toward me and whispered, "You first." It was a microscopic gesture, but it was real. Later that night, Mom raised her glass. She didn't make a grand, sweeping speech. She just looked at me and said, "I used to praise you for being strong, Clara, but what I really meant was that I expected you to survive without my support. I was wrong. Your boundaries are not a punishment. They are a demand for respect, and I am so deeply sorry it took me 29 years to give it to you. I didn't get revenge by ruining my sister's life. I got revenge by refusing to let her build her fake life on the foundation of my silence. The $2,500 I lost that night wasn't a penalty. It was the absolute best investment I ever made. It bought me my freedom." My mom secretly promised my house to her golden child, so I evicted him, changed the locks, and uncovered a decades-old family secret. I, 28 Midas, have been living in my own house for the past 3 years. I bought this place with my own money in Portland, Oregon. I've worked my absolute butt off since I was 17 years old, skipping parties, working double shifts, and saving every single penny I could scrape together. Finally, at 25, I managed to get a beautiful, decent-sized 3-bedroom house in a quiet, safe neighborhood. It's nothing insanely fancy or luxurious, but it is mine. I've put hundreds of hours of sweat equity into making it exactly how I want it, refinishing the original hardwood floors, painting the walls, and upgrading the fixtures. My absolute pride and joy is the master bedroom. It's spacious, gets incredible morning sunlight, and has a beautiful ensuite bathroom with a double vanity that I saved up for months to remodel. About 8 months ago, my younger brother Leo, who is 20, dropped out of university. He had been struggling heavily with his grades, skipping classes, and apparently, the academic pressure was just entirely too much for him to handle. My mom, Brenda, has absolutely babied this kid since the day he was born. Because he's the youngest, he's always been treated as the sensitive one, the delicate artistic soul who requires special understanding and endless accommodations. Meanwhile, I've been working grueling hours in logistics management since I was a teenager, paying my own way through life, and not once has anybody ever stopped to worry about my stress levels or my mental health. When Leo officially dropped out, Mom called me in tears. She asked if he could stay with me for just a few short weeks while he figured things out, decompressed, and looked for a job. I said yes because, at the end of the day, he is my little brother and I love him. I set him up in one of my 2 guest bedrooms. It is a genuinely nice room. It's a great size, has a massive walk-in closet, a comfortable queen-sized bed, and a large window. The only thing it doesn't have is the private ensuite bathroom that my master bedroom has. He just has to walk exactly 4 steps down the hall to use the main guest bathroom, which he has entirely to himself anyway. Fast forward to yesterday. Mom comes over for our traditional Sunday dinner. She does this every single week. Afterwards, while I'm clearing the plates, she puts her hand on my arm and asks to speak with me privately in the living room. She sits down, sighs heavily, and starts going on and on about how Leo is really struggling mentally, how he feels stagnant, and how he desperately needs space to heal and grow into adulthood. Then, she drops the absolute bomb on me. She looks me dead in the eye and says she thinks I should give Leo my master bedroom. Her reasoning? The master bedroom is bigger, has much better natural light, features the ensuite bathroom, and I kid you not would give Leo the dignity and privacy a young man needs during this incredibly difficult transition. She actually used the word, times dignity, as if living completely rent-free in a beautiful guest bedroom in someone else's house somehow strips a person of their dignity. I honestly thought she was making a bizarre joke at first. I let out a little laugh and waited for the punchline. When I realized she was dead serious, her face completely stone cold, I immediately said, absolutely not. That is my bedroom. In my house. That I pay the mortgage on every single month. Leo has been living here rent-free for 8 months, eating the groceries I buy, using my high-speed internet, driving up my utility bills, and contributing absolutely nothing to the household. And now, I am somehow supposed to give up my own bed and my own private sanctuary, too? Mom's immediate response was to cross her arms, glare at me, and tell me that I was being incredibly selfish and completely failing to think about family. She said Leo is at a crucial developmental stage and that having a nice, premium space could really boost his mental health and daily motivation. She literally pointed out that because I am established in my career and mature enough to handle a smaller room, I should take the guest room, while Leo needs all the environmental support he can get. She also specifically mentioned that the ensuite bathroom would be significantly better for Leo, because he is shy about his body and gets uncomfortable using the hallway bathroom when I have friends over. For the record, I have people over maybe once a month for a couple of beers, and whenever I do, Leo completely locks himself in his room with his noise-canceling headphones the entire time anyway. The conversation quickly devolved. It ended with her standing up, calling me a heartless, materialistic brother, and saying, "Your father would be so unbelievably disappointed in the man you've become." My dad, Arthur, passed away 6 years ago from a sudden heart attack. She knows damn well that invoking his name is the lowest possible blow she could ever deliver. She grabbed her purse and left my house in a massive huff, slamming the front door behind her. Leo hasn't come out of his room since. I can hear him constantly whispering on the phone, presumably with Mom, and I am absolutely certain that I am being painted as the ultimate villain of the century in whatever narrative they are spinning. Here is what really gets under my skin and makes my blood boil. Leo isn't even trying to get his life together. Not even a little bit. He sleeps until 1 p.m. every single day, plays competitive video games until 4 a.m., leaves his dirty dishes all over the kitchen counter, and talks endlessly about maybe starting a Twitch streaming channel or becoming a professional esports player. He has made zero tangible effort to find a job, update his resume, or look into community college classes. His hard time seems to consist exclusively of having way too much free time, zero responsibilities, and zero consequences. Meanwhile, I am working 50 to 60 hours a week managing a massive supply chain team, paying every single bill, buying all the food, cooking the meals, and basically acting as a free luxury hotel service for a grown adult. But somehow, In their twisted reality, I am the bad guy for not wanting to give up my own bedroom in my own house. I'm starting to second guess myself, though. Mom has been relentlessly texting me links to psychology articles about supporting family members through severe mental health struggles and the vital importance of creating healing environments for trauma. She is expertly making me feel like I am being a selfish monster who doesn't care about his own flesh and blood's well-being. Am I being completely unreasonable here? Should I just give up the bedroom for a few months to keep the peace and help him out? Part of me wonders if I'm being way too rigid and territorial about my house and my rules, but another part of me feels like this is a completely insane, unhinged request. Help me out here, Reddit. Edit. Since several people asked in the comments, no, Leo does not pay a single dime in rent or contribute to any household expenses whatsoever. The original verbal agreement was that he would stay for exactly 3 weeks while aggressively job hunting. It has now been 8 months. He also absolutely does not help with any household chores unless I specifically hunt him down and ask him to do it, and even then, it's done begrudgingly with heavy sighs and eye rolls. Update 1, 2 weeks later. Well, Reddit, you are not going to believe how astronomically this situation has escalated. First off, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who responded to my original post. The unanimous consensus that I was not being unreasonable gave me the exact backbone and reality check I desperately needed. Unfortunately, things have gotten so much worse than I ever could have imagined. After reading your comments, I decided to have a calm, rational, adult conversation with Leo. I sat him down at the kitchen table and explained that while I am happy to help him through this rough patch, we urgently need to establish some firm boundaries and basic expectations. I suggested we create a concrete timeline for him to find part-time work or enroll in some certification classes, and requested that he start contributing to the household chores at a bare minimum like taking out the trash and loading the dishwasher. Leo's response? He immediately started crying, full-on, hyperventilating tears, saying I was pressuring him just like everyone else at his old university, and that I didn't understand the sheer weight of what he was going through. When I gently asked him to help me understand what exactly he was going through, he just vaguely waved his hands, said it was complicated trauma, and that he needed more time and space to figure himself out. I held firm. I kept my voice calm but authoritative, telling him he could have all the time and space he needed in the guest bedroom, provided he started looking for work. That is when he dropped this absolute gem of a sentence. Mom said you'd probably come around to giving me the big room once you thought about it more. My blood ran cold. Turns out, my mother had already explicitly told Leo that the master bedroom was his. She had literally promised him my room without my permission, behind my back. They had apparently been discussing for weeks how he could redecorate it, where he would put his dual monitor streaming setup, and what color LED lights he would put behind the headboard. I was blindingly furious. I called my mom immediately and told her in no uncertain terms that she had absolutely no right to promise my bedroom to anyone on this planet. Her response? She used her sweet, condescending customer service voice and said she just knew I'd do the right thing eventually, and that she was just helping Leo visualize his healing space, so he could manifest a better mental state. She actually used the term healing space with a straight face. I made it crystal clear, using very small, direct words, that Leo would not be getting my bedroom, period. End of discussion. I also turned to Leo and told him that if he wasn't happy with the massive, free accommodation he was currently getting, he was more than welcome to pack his bags and move back in with Mom. That shut down the waterworks pretty quickly. For about a week, things were incredibly tense but relatively quiet. Leo sulked in his room, only coming out to microwave pizza rolls. Mom sent me a barrage of passive-aggressive quotes on Instagram about family values and narcissistic siblings, but at least nobody was actively trying to steal my bedroom. Then came yesterday. I came home from a particularly brutal, exhausting 12-hour day at work. I walked through the front door and immediately heard loud laughter and thumping bass coming from upstairs. I walked up the stairs to find my master bedroom door wide open, and Leo inside with 3 of his friends. They were sitting on my bed with their dirty sneakers on, using my expensive OLED TV, and had greasy pizza boxes and open cans of Mountain Dew spread out across my expensive oak dresser. But here is the absolute kicker. Leo was literally giving them a grand tour of his new room, and showing them exactly where he planned to mount his gaming setup and ring lights. I lost my absolute mind. I stepped into the room and told his friends to get out of my house immediately. They scattered like terrified roaches, grabbing their skateboards, muttering apologies, and avoiding eye contact as they practically sprinted down the stairs. Leo, though, had the sheer audacity to be furious with me. He puffed out his chest and accused me of humiliating him in front of his friends and completely ruining his social life. When I demanded to know what the hell he thought he was doing in my private space, he smugly said Mom had told him it was totally fine to start getting comfortable in the room since I would obviously cave soon. He had even started moving his stuff into my walk-in closet. My closet. There were literal anime body pillows and posters propped against my suits, and his heavy gaming chair was already assembled in the corner, scraping against my pristine hardwood floors. The entitlement was so heavy it was breathtaking. This kid genuinely believed that my bedroom was already his property, and I was just being a stubborn roadblock delaying the inevitable. I told him to get his stuff out immediately. He crossed his arms and refused, saying Mom said he could keep his things there to claim the energy of the room. So, I did what any reasonable homeowner would do. I grabbed his gaming chair, his posters, and his pillows, and I started hauling his crap out into the hallway myself. Leo immediately pulled out his phone, called Mom crying hysterically, and within 20 short minutes, she was banging on my front door. The confrontation was incredibly ugly. She stormed in and accused me of traumatizing Leo and being physically violent. I wasn't violent. I just moved his plastic chair and his pillows. She screamed that she was creating a hostile living environment. She said Leo had been so incredibly excited and motivated about having a nice space for his streaming career, and I had maliciously crushed his spirit out of pure jealousy. I reminded her, loudly, that this is my house, purchased with my money, the mortgage is in my name, and I decide who sleeps where. Her response was a masterclass in delusion. She claimed that family homes belong to the whole family regardless of whose name is on a silly piece of paper, and that I was being deeply materialistic by focusing on legal ownership rather than Leo's emotional needs. When logic failed, she tried her favorite tactic, tears. My 55-year-old mother actually collapsed onto my sofa, sobbing hysterically about how agonizing it's been for her to watch Leo struggle, how she just desperately wants him to be happy, and how she thought I'd be much more understanding given the grief our family has been through since Dad died. But I held firm. I felt nothing but exhaustion. I told her, Leo has a perfectly good room, and if that is not sufficient for his precious energy, he is welcome to leave right this second. I also made it explicitly clear that if I ever found him in my room again without my permission, I would be changing the locks on my bedroom door. Mom left in a wailing fit of tears. Leo locked himself in his room, the guest room, and I sat in my kitchen wondering how on earth my life had suddenly morphed into a cheap daytime soap opera. I started to see a massive pattern that I was completely blind to before. Leo has always been entirely insulated from reality. When he failed his classes in high school, Mom went down there and blamed the teachers for not accommodating his learning style. When he couldn't hold a simple retail job at 17, it was because the managers were toxic and too demanding. When he dropped out of university, it was the institution's fault for not nurturing his unique potential. And now, I am the bad guy for not giving up my bedroom. It is always someone else's responsibility to accommodate Leo. It is never Leo's responsibility to adapt to reality. I immediately went to the hardware store and bought a heavy-duty deadbolt for my bedroom door. I installed it that night. Update 2, 1 month later. Reddit, I am back with another update, and honestly, I don't even know where to begin. The last 4 weeks have been absolutely insane, and I have learned some dark things about my family's history that have completely shattered and reshaped my entire perspective on my life. After my last update, I genuinely thought things would calm down. I had changed the locks on my bedroom door, established crystal clear boundaries, and assumed Leo and Mom would eventually accept reality. God, I was so incredibly naive. For about 2 weeks, Leo barely spoke a single word to me. He would sneak out of his room at 2 a.m., grab handfuls of snacks from the pantry, and scurry back to his room like a feral raccoon. Mom was giving me the ultimate cold shoulder, responding to my texts with passive-aggressive one-word answers, and entirely skipping our weekly Sunday dinners. I was actually thoroughly enjoying the absolute peace and quiet. Then, I made a massive mistake. I had to go away for a weekend logistics conference in Seattle. It was only 2 nights, and I figured Leo could handle being alone in the house for 48 hours. I even left him a $50 bill for takeout pizza and told him exactly what my expectations were: no parties, absolutely no guests in my private spaces, and keep the kitchen clean. I came back on Sunday evening to an absolute disaster zone. Leo had thrown a massive party. It wasn't just a few friends, it was enough people to completely trash my living room and kitchen. There were sticky alcohol stains on my custom sofa, empty beer bottles and liquor handles everywhere, half-eaten food ground into the rugs, and someone had definitely puked in the downstairs powder room and left it there to bake in the heat. But that wasn't the worst part. I sprinted upstairs, my heart pounding in my throat. My bedroom door was wide open. The heavy-duty deadbolt lock I had installed had been completely removed. It was literally unscrewed from the solid wood door, leaving splintered holes behind. And inside, it was a nightmare of violation. My bed was unmade and smelled like cheap weed and body odor. There were more empty bottles on my nightstand, leaving water rings on the wood. My personal ensuite bathroom had clearly been heavily used, with wet towels thrown on the floor. But the absolute cherry on top of this nightmare Sunday? Leo's massive gaming setup, the dual monitors, the LED lights, the heavy desk, and the microphone boom arm was fully assembled and plugged in right in the corner of my master bedroom. He had moved in. I called him immediately. He wasn't home. He didn't answer. I called Mom. She answered on the second ring, sounding incredibly chipper, and before I could even get a word out, she said, "Now, Mark, before you overreact." Turns out, she had actively helped him remove the lock. She had driven over while I was in Seattle, brought her own personal toolbox from her garage, and physically helped Leo unscrew my lock and move all his heavy furniture into my room because, in her psychotic words, it was the perfect, stress-free opportunity to make the transition while you weren't there to make it difficult and negative. I cannot adequately describe the blinding, white-hot rage I felt in that exact moment. This wasn't just about a bedroom anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was about my mother actively conspiring with and helping my brother break into my locked, private sanctuary in the home that I own. I told her she had exactly 1 hour to get over here with Leo and get his stuff out of my room, or I was calling the police. She laughed. She actually giggled into the receiver and said, "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Mark, you wouldn't call the cops on your own family." She was dead wrong. I hung up, dialed the non-emergency police line, and explained that a family member had dismantled the locks on my interior doors and moved their belongings into my private space without authorization. The officer who came out, Officer Davis, was incredibly professional and surprisingly helpful. Mom and Leo showed up in record time once they saw the police cruiser parked in my driveway. Mom came storming up the walkway, ready to scream at me, but froze the second she saw the badge. Officer Davis explained to Leo and my mother that yes, what they did was technically breaking and entering and destruction of private property, and yes, I was well within my legal rights to press formal charges if I wanted to. The look on my mother's face was absolutely priceless. It belongs in a museum. She went from arrogant and indignant to utterly terrified in about 2 seconds flat. Her jaw literally dropped. Leo just stood there looking completely shocked, his eyes wide, like he couldn't physically comprehend that there were actual, real-world consequences for his actions. I decided not to press criminal charges, but I absolutely used the massive leverage I now had. Standing right there in front of the officer, I told Leo he had exactly 30 days to find alternative housing and get out of my house. Officer Davis helped mediate this and even stood there while I wrote up a formal, signed 30-day eviction notice on a legal pad. Mom tried to argue, her voice shaking, but the cop shut her down incredibly quickly, explaining in a stern voice that I was being extremely generous by giving them any notice at all instead of putting him in handcuffs. The next few days were insanely tense. Leo moved all his stuff back to the guest room in complete silence and hasn't dared go anywhere near my bedroom since. Mom has been calling and texting nonstop, alternating between vicious guilt trips, "How could you threaten your own flesh and blood with jail time?" and emotional manipulation. "Your father is looking down on you with such shame." But here is where things get truly interesting, and where everything finally clicked into place for me. My Aunt Sarah, Mom's older sister, reached out after hearing through the family grapevine about the massive police drama. She asked if we could meet for coffee, completely off the record. What she told me over lattes was earth-shattering. Apparently, this toxic dynamic with Leo is not new at all. When my parents were still married, my dad constantly fought vicious, screaming matches with Mom about her babying Leo. It was the single major source of tension in their marriage. Dad desperately wanted Leo to face consequences and learn basic responsibility, while Mom always swooped in to save him from reality. Aunt Sarah told me about major incidents I either had forgotten or never even knew about. Like when Leo was 14 and stole $300 cash from Dad's hidden office safe. Mom secretly replaced the money from her own savings so Leo wouldn't get grounded. Or when Leo was caught blatantly cheating on his final exams at 16. Mom went down to the high school, threatened to sue the principal, and argued until they caved and agreed to let him retake the test with zero academic penalty. The pattern goes back over a decade. She also told me a secret that made me break down in tears right there in the coffee shop. Dad had actually set aside a massive chunk of money specifically for me in a completely separate, secret trust account that Mom had absolutely no access to. He did this because he was terrified of exactly this kind of situation happening. He knew Mom would drain every single asset they had to baby Leo, and he wanted to make sure I wasn't left with nothing. I did receive this money after he passed away, and it's actually what allowed me to put the down payment on my house, but I never knew the painful reasoning behind why it was kept a secret from Mom. The conversation with Aunt Sarah made me realize this entire nightmare isn't really about a master bedroom at all. It is about a deeply ingrained, toxic family dynamic that has been building like a pressure cooker for years, and I have been unknowingly enabling it by constantly trying to be the good son and keeping the peace. So, I made a massive decision. I stuck to the 30-day notice despite the constant, agonizing pressure from Mom and extended family members. I also finally started seeing a therapist, which has been incredibly helpful in unpacking all of this generational family dysfunction. Leo has been frantically looking for places to live, suddenly highly motivated now that he realizes I am deadly serious and the police have a record of his behavior. Mom offered to let him move back in with her, but apparently, he doesn't want to because her condo is way too small and doesn't have fiber optic internet for his streaming. The sheer irony is absolutely delicious. We are now at day 26 of the 30-day notice. Leo has found a small room to rent in a house with 3 other guys his age, and he is officially moving out this coming weekend. Mom is barely speaking to me, but honestly, the peace in my mind is worth every second of her silence. I know this isn't the magical update some of you might have wanted. There is no big, beautiful redemption arc where Leo suddenly becomes a hyper-responsible adult, or where mom breaks down in tears and realizes she has been a terrible parent. But real life is so much messier than that. Sometimes, the absolute best you can do is establish ironclad boundaries and stick to them, even when it means permanently damaging relationships. Final update, 3 months later. Hello Reddit. I promised a final update once the dust entirely settled. And boy, do I have a story for you. It has been 3 full months since Leo officially moved out of my house, and the situation has evolved in ways I never, ever could have predicted in a million years. First, let me address the immediate aftermath of Leo's departure. Moving day was completely drama-filled, exactly as expected. Mom showed up with a massive 26-foot U-Haul truck way bigger than necessary for Leo's meager possessions and spent the entire 4 hours making loud, passive-aggressive comments about how some people forget where they came from, and how blood is supposed to be thicker than water. Leo, for his part, was sullen, moody, and barely spoke a word to me. As he was carrying his gaming chair out to the truck, he did manage to mutter something under his breath about how I would deeply regret this when I needed his help someday. I just smiled, handed him a box of his anime posters, and helped him load his stuff anyway, because despite everything, I still wanted him out as fast as possible. The first few weeks after he left were nothing short of blissful. I deep cleaned my entire house from top to bottom, shampooed the carpets to get the smell of his friend's cheap beer out, reorganized everything, and finally felt like I could actually breathe and relax in my own home. I even converted the guest room he was in into a beautiful home office, complete with a massive oak desk and bookshelves, which I had been wanting to do for ages. Mom maintained complete radio silence for about 3 weeks. Then, the texts started trickling in. First, they were subtle and probing. Hope you're doing well. The big house must feel so empty and lonely. Your brother really misses you. I responded politely, but employed the gray rock method, not engaging beyond basic pleasantries. Then, about 6 weeks after Leo moved out, Mom called me with massive news. Leo had apparently been absolutely thriving in his new environment. He had gotten a part-time job at a local tech repair and gaming store, and was really finding his footing. She gushed for 20 minutes about how incredibly proud she was and how the move had been exactly the push he needed to mature. I was genuinely, truly happy for Leo. Maybe hitting rock bottom and being forced to pay his own rent was the exact wake-up call he needed to start adulting. I told Mom I was thrilled he was doing well, and foolishly thought that would be the end of the drama. 2 weeks later, she invited me to Sunday dinner at her condo. I hadn't seen her in person since moving day, and despite all the insane toxicity, I missed our family dinners, so I cautiously agreed to go. Dinner actually started out incredibly pleasant. She made pot roast, Dad's old favorite. Leo was there, and he actually looked genuinely good. He had cut his messy hair, seemed to have way more energy, and even made normal, polite small talk about his new coworkers and his job. I started to relax my shoulders, thinking maybe, just maybe, we could move past all the police drama and be a normal family again. Then, over the cherry pie dessert, Mom dropped her nuclear bomb. So, Mark, she started, using that specific, sickly sweet tone that immediately put my nervous system on high alert. I have been thinking a lot about your living situation. My living situation? I asked, setting my fork down. I own a house. What is there to think about? She smiled, clasping her hands together. You know, Leo is doing so incredibly well now. He is really growing into a mature, responsible young man. And his current living situation is adequate, but it's just not ideal for someone in such a crucial career development phase. I knew exactly where this was going, but I let her continue, morbidly curious about the sheer mental gymnastics she was about to perform. The room he is renting is very small, and sharing a single bathroom with 3 other loud boys isn't conducive to the professional image he needs to maintain for his new job. Plus, that neighborhood isn't the best, and as a mother, I worry constantly about his safety. Leo, I noticed, was suddenly very deeply interested in his slice of pie, refusing to make eye contact with anyone at the table. Mom took a deep breath, her eyes shining with delusion. I think it would be absolutely best for everyone if Leo moved back in with you permanently. He has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that he can be responsible now, and family should always support each other's upward trajectory. You have all that space. I almost laughed right then and there. The audacity was absolutely breathtaking. But wait, it gets so much better. And, she continued, raising a finger, since Leo is a working professional now and actively contributing to society, it only makes logical sense that he should have the master bedroom. You could easily take the smaller guest room. After all, you are rarely home with your busy work schedule anyway. Leo needs a proper, expansive space to rest after his grueling shifts and to maintain his streaming setup, which could easily become a lucrative second income source for him. She actually sat there and presented this as if it were a perfectly reasonable, logical business proposal. As if the last 4 months of screaming matches, broken locks, and police visits hadn't even happened. As if Leo paying his own rent somewhere else for a mere 6 weeks somehow erased a lifetime of entitlement and automatically earned him the deed to my master bedroom. Besides, she added, delivering what she clearly thought was the ultimate checkmate. Mature adults adapt to family needs. Young people need extreme stability during their formative years. You are well established in your career. Leo is just starting out. The responsible, loving thing would be to support him. I sat there in silence for a long moment, genuinely stunned by the absolute absurdity on display. I looked at her earnest face, then at Leo, who was practically trying to merge with his chair. Then, I started laughing. Not a polite, uncomfortable chuckle, but real, deep, belly laughter. The kind of laughter that makes your stomach physically hurt and brings tears to your eyes. Mom looked deeply offended. Her face flushed red. I don't see what is so funny about supporting your family, Mark. That is when I lost it. Not in rage or anger this time, but in pure, exhausted, unfiltered honesty. Mom, I said, wiping a tear from my eye. Do you hear yourself? Do you genuinely, truly not see how completely insane you sound? Leo is an adult. He is not 12 years old. Millions of 20-year-olds manage to live in small rooms and share bathrooms without their entire lives falling apart. I did it. You did it when you were young. Dad did it. Everyone does it. It's called being an adult. I turned my gaze to my brother. And you? Are you seriously sitting here silently listening to this? Are you not deeply embarrassed? You have a job now, which is fantastic, and I am genuinely proud of you for that. But working at a cash register for 6 weeks does not mean you get a golden ticket to upgrade to the master bedroom in a house that I bought and pay for. Leo finally looked up, his face burning red. I didn't ask her to say this. He mumbled defensively. But you didn't stop her either, I pointed out sharply. Which tells me you were sitting there, hoping I would cave to the pressure. Mom tried to interject, her voice rising in pitch, but I held up a hand. I wasn't done. You know what? I am completely tired of this. I am exhausted from being treated like my only value to this family is what financial resources I can provide. My house is not a spiritual retreat center for Leo to find himself. 5. My bedroom is not a shiny prize to be awarded to whoever you think needs it most this week. And my life, my comfort, and my boundaries are not less important just because I have my shit together and don't cry when things get hard. I stood up, threw my napkin on the table, and grabbed my jacket. Mom immediately started crying, the crocodile tears flowing instantly, screaming that I was tearing the family apart and breaking her heart. But for the very first time in my entire life, her tears had absolutely zero effect on me. I felt nothing but pity. No, Mom, I said calmly, looking down at her. You are tearing the family apart by constantly demanding I sacrifice my life for Leo. By teaching him that he is entitled to whatever he wants if he just waits long enough or makes others feel guilty enough. I love you both, but I am entirely done participating in this toxic dynamic. I walked out the front door. The cool night air hit my face, and I swear to God, it felt amazing. I felt 10 pounds lighter. That was a month ago. Since then, I have had minimal, strictly necessary contact with both of them. Leo actually texted me a week later, offering a genuine apology. He said he didn't know Mom was going to ambush me like that at dinner. I believe him, partly. I think he casually mentioned to Mom that he hated sharing a bathroom with his roommates, and her twisted brain ran with it and concocted the master bedroom scheme. But he also didn't exactly discourage her when she was pitching it. Mom has predictably cycled through every single manipulation tactic in the narcissist playbook. She has tried guilt. I am getting older and my health is failing. I just want my boys to get along. She has tried anger. You are a selfish, greedy pig and you will die completely alone. She has deployed flying monkeys. Various distant aunts and uncles have blown up my phone to tell me I should be the bigger person. She even tried blatant bribery, offering to pay for an all-expenses-paid family vacation to Hawaii if I would just stop being so stubborn and let Leo move in. I have stayed incredibly firm. I block the flying monkeys. I ignore the guilt trips. I see my therapist every single Tuesday, and she has helped me profoundly understand that this isn't about a bedroom, or even really about Leo. It is about a fundamental, deep-seated lack of respect for my boundaries and my autonomy as a human being. It is about being viewed purely as a resource and a safety net, rather than a person with my own needs. But here is the ultimate plot twist that makes this whole ordeal worth it. Last week, Aunt Sarah called me with a massive update. Apparently, Leo has been doing incredibly well, actually, legitimately well. He got promoted to assistant shift manager at the gaming store. He is saving his money, and he is even talking about enrolling in community college part-time next semester to study IT. And here is the absolute kicker. He told Aunt Sarah in private that me forcing him to move out was the single best thing that ever happened to him because it finally forced him to grow up and face the real world. He has apparently even started aggressively pushing back against Mom's incessant babying, telling her to stop calling his boss to check on him and that he can handle his own life. Mom, predictably, is absolutely losing her mind over this. She is not handling his newfound independence well at all. She has been crying to anyone who will listen that both of her sons have cruelly abandoned her and that she suffers from empty nest syndrome. She built her entire identity around being Leo's savior, and now that he doesn't need saving, she doesn't know what to do with herself. As for me, I am doing absolutely fantastic. My house is a peaceful sanctuary. My office is set up exactly how I want it, I am killing it at work, and I am sleeping soundly in my beautiful master bedroom every single night. I have even started dating a really wonderful woman, and it is incredibly nice being able to bring her over for dinner without constantly worrying about my brother's mess or my mother's screaming matches. I have learned a massive amount from this horrible experience. Mainly, I learned that family first does not mean family only, and it certainly does not mean family at the cost of your own sanity. Sometimes, the absolute most loving, caring thing you can possibly do for a person is to establish firm boundaries and stick to them, even when it is incredibly hard, even when people cry, scream, and call you a selfish monster. Even when you are painted as the villain in their twisted story. Leo and I might rebuild our relationship someday. I genuinely hope we do, but when we do, it will be on equal terms, as two independent adults, who respect each other's boundaries and property. As for Mom, that is a much longer, darker road. She needs to fundamentally understand that her children are separate individuals with their own lives, not just extensions of her will and property to be managed. I am not holding my breath for an apology, but I am open to the possibility of low contact in the distant future. Thank you Reddit, for being with me through this insane journey. Your support, tough love, and outside perspective helped me see clearly when I was deeply lost in the thick fog of family manipulation. For anyone out there dealing with similar golden child, scapegoat situations, remember, you are not crazy, you are not selfish, and you absolutely deserve safety and respect in your own home. This is my final update. I am permanently closing this chaotic chapter and moving forward with my life. And yes, I am doing it happily from the comfort of my master bedroom. Edit 2. Since a few people asked in the recent comments, yes, I still have the heavy-duty deadbolt locks on my bedroom door. No, I am never giving anyone else a spare key. And yes, I have made it abundantly clear to any future roommates or partners that my boundaries regarding my personal space are completely non-negotiable. Fool me once, shame on you. Try to steal my bedroom twice, you get evicted. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button, it really helps the channel out and allows us to bring you even more awesome stories. Thank you so much for watching.